life raft, and I had a ball there in a gentle sea state, fair skies, and a chance to be alone in my contemplation of a recent fascinating experience.
Well, I think you had a great time up there.
It was the last mission Carpenter was ever asked to fly, but he probably didn't mind that either. He began a new career as a deep-sea diver. There are often tensions between those who man the rockets and the politicians and the generals who command them. The politicians often get their way, even when their orders are lethal. In 1960, a Russian rocket exploded on the launch pad, killing 126 engineers and ground crew. Against the better judgment of many of them, they were where they were and doing what they were doing because a Soviet general was impatient to see the rocket take off. Like other catastrophes, it was kept secret. But in 1967, there was a Russian space tragedy that the whole world watched. In April 1967, cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov was driven out to the Russian launch site at Baikonur, where a new rocket, the Soyuz 1, was waiting to take him into orbit. Soyuz had a troubled history. 3 unmanned launches had ended in disaster. That morning, Komarov had been told that the rocket had no fewer than 203 technical faults.
I was there when Komarov was being interviewed, and I saw that he was sort of depressed. He didn't smile, he didn't joke, he was sad and depressed.
The commanders were well aware of the rocket's accident-prone history. In fact, it was seen as so risky, they didn't allow Yuri Gagarin, the country's most famous cosmonaut, to be Komarov's backup pilot.
They offered Gagarin as a backup, but the political leadership of the country said they couldn't risk Gagarin's life. He was the last man who saw Komarov at the launch pad.
Komarov was launched on Soyuz 1 early on the morning of the 23rd of April. The date is significant. The Soviet government wanted to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Russian Revolution by having a man in space on May the 1st. Komarov's technical troubles started the moment he entered orbit. First, it was a solar panel. It wouldn't open. That meant not enough power and not enough control over the spacecraft. Komarov tried everything to make it work, even banging with his fist on the inside of the capsule. Finally, after 19 orbits, his commanders gave up. Komarov was ordered back to Earth.
Komarov очень спокойным голосом.
Komarov in a very calm, normal voice reported from orbit. Well, now my antennas will burn out, which was supposed to happen, and he said, "See you on the Earth."
Komarov nursed the failing Soyuz into position for re-entry. So far, so good. He successfully sliced through the barrier of the Earth's atmosphere. The people on the ground breathed a sigh of relief and got ready to greet the returning hero. Prior to the launch, Soyuz had 203 technical faults. It was the 204th that was to prove lethal.
When the parachute went out, the ropes began twisting into a knot.
With his tangled parachute flapping uselessly above him, Komarov realized he was about to die.
It hit the ground. The lander cracked, and there was a fire inside. Only part of his body and his head remained intact. The rest was burnt.
Next to the shattered capsule lay the twisted parachute that had failed Vladimir Komarov. It was discovered later that a mistake had been made at the factory. No matter how well the rest of the flight had gone, Komarov would never have got back alive. His fate was sealed months before the launch. So instead of having a man in space for May Day, the government that had sent Komarov up in an unreliable spacecraft were faced with a state funeral. Parts of the dead cosmonaut were buried in Red Square. The rest of his body lies at the crash site. While the Russians mourned their dead, the American space program forged ahead.
Eagle Houston, you're go for landing, over. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. 30 seconds, over. 40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up the 7. Okay, engine stop. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, 20.
On the 20th of July, 1969, Neil Armstrong became the first man to set foot on the moon.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
It was an extraordinary achievement, and since Apollo 1, the Americans have not lost a single life. Space travel looked almost easy. But, as NASA were to discover on the very next moon flight, putting people into space will always be hazardous. On the 14th of November 1969, NASA was preparing to launch Apollo 12, its second mission to the moon. That morning, a rain front had settled over Cape Kennedy, and the clouds were low.
I can remember sitting in that console with my hands sweating just prior to liftoff. Nobody knew it, but I was nervous.